Hey everyone, thanks for listening to Limited Engagement. I'm your host for the show, Jared Duran. On this episode, we have got Robert Dean Lurie, who is a writer and the author of a great book on R.E.M, which I'll get into in just a little bit. Not gonna have nearly the kind of intro that I did last week, and that's probably a relief to everyone involved. I do have some sad news to pass along, though. I failed to mention last week, but longtime listeners to the show will be familiar with Gizmo, most likely. He's interrupted a number of episodes and, popped up in the social media feed for Limited Engagement and for Hoot and Waddle, and he passed away last week. I hadn't had much opportunity to see him lately since Janelle and I had broken up, and I got Susu, and Gizmo was her dog. So, but I did get to see him his last week, and felt lucky to have done so because he passed unexpectedly. He had lymphoma. And that was kind of that sucks. He was a good dog, and R.I.P. Gizmo. There are plenty of pictures of him in the Limited Engagement Instagram feed, which is LTD Engagement. Rest of the business at LTD_engagement on Twitter, ltd.engagement@gmail.com. There's ltdengagementpod.com if you want to go to the website. Haven't really updated that much in a while, but it's there. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, if you would please rate and review the show. That does help its profile immensely, and as far as coming up in people's recommended listens and all that. And anywhere that you listen to the show, if you would be so kind as to subscribe and rate and review, would be fantastic. I think that I'm trying not to read too much into it, but it's a little disconcerting that in the past month, I have had an escalating series of injuries to my person that began towards the beginning of August, I guess. Just kind of putting away a broken down box on top of this wardrobe that's in the bedroom of this place, and thought I had plenty of clearance, but it's kind of a low ceiling, and reached up to put the box away and got thwacked by the blades of the ceiling fan, and it actually went pretty deep. There was a pretty big gouge of skin out of there, and bled for quite some time. And then, shortly thereafter, I think I mentioned last week that I was just walking along the streets of downtown Phoenix and stepped off a curb and directly onto a 3-inch screw that luckily only went a little bit into my foot. Just kind of a surface scratch that healed pretty quickly. And then earlier this week, or last week, I guess, when this posts, I was recording an episode of this show, actually, that's coming up later in September. And after that was done, I was like, all right, I feel like going for a run. So I went out for a run, and then, I had kind of stepped off the sidewalk to go around this plant that was taking up all of the sidewalk, and get around it, and went to get back onto the sidewalk and tripped and just fucking biffed it. Hard, like all on my left side. I've got these really kind of gnarly, I guess, cuts, scrapes, road burns on my knee and on my hip, and along my arm there's a pretty bad one, kind of scuffed up all over the place. And I must have hit my chest at some point, because I'm finding it hard to take a deep breath without pain, and laughing hurts a little bit, and sneezing, just generally moving. I think it's just tender, maybe just bruised. I don't think I broke anything. Kind of tried to like feel around there, and it doesn't feel like I have anything broken, but I'm a little concerned. I mean, at this rate, by the end of the month, I could be dead. Driving down to Tucson here over the weekend, hoping to catch some of Hoko Fest. There's a great lineup for Sunday, and which there was a great lineup on Sunday, so because this will post on Labor Day, the day after, and I'm gonna have to watch it. This has escalated quickly, and that actually, the laughing there just hurt. So enough of that. Maybe a little less talking. All right, so to my guest for the show, as I mentioned, is Robert Dean Lurie. He wrote a book called Begin the Begin that is on R.E.M's early years. It's from Verse Chorus Press. I've picked up my copy over at Changing Hands, so little non-paid-for plug for them. And it's a great book. I actually like this press. I have a couple other things. I have a book on the Go-Betweens from them, and Robert wrote another book for them on the church, the band, the church, the Steve Kilby fronted band, which we talk a little bit about that. But this book, it's well, we'll get into it more in the conversation, but it's it doesn't involve interviews with the band members. It ends up telling more about the band's rise in popularity and how they started out, and came to prominence in the early 80s, and the part leading up to that point through people who were friends with the band, through other bands that played with them at the time, people that were in Athens, in that whole college scene and the music scene there. And it's a really, really cool way of telling it. And he takes a little more of a laid-back storytelling approach to it, and it makes it very readable, and I highly recommend it. So again, that's called Begin the Begin, R.E.M. R.E.M's early years, Robert Dean Lurie. And let's go ahead and get into that conversation and see you just a little bit on the other side. So that's right. That's me. But I dabbled very briefly in my teens with actually trying to write songs, and that was really the way I wanted to go for a while. But I don't know. I just became content to play other people's stuff after a while and just kind of noodle around and keep the writing to poetry and fiction.
Sure.
So, how long have you been out here now then?
13 years.
13 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a decent amount of time.
Yeah.
What actually brought you out here?
My wife, who was just my girlfriend at the time, came out to go to ASU, get a graduate degree in dance choreography. Mm-hmm. And she came out. She was out here for about a semester, and then I just followed. And I think the idea was we were just going to hang out here while she did her degree, and then go back south. We were in North Carolina before we came out here, mm-hmm. or go somewhere else. And I kind of fell in love with it, actually, out here. I fell in love with the desert. And she's had kind of a love-hate relationship with it, but she's grown to really like it as well. And we got married, and the housing market crashed, so it was like prime time to just snatch something up. And so we did.
On the cheap.
Yeah. So we got something like it's right in the middle of Tempe, right near near ASU. really cool neighborhood that's kind of similar to the neighborhoods that we grew up in.
Oh, nice.
And so, we just kind of took advantage of that moment, and now we're here for 13 years, and my daughter just started kindergarten, and we put her in this Montessori school that actually goes all the way through high school. So I think we're just going to stay, And,
gotcha.
Yeah.
You're in the system now.
Yeah.
Once the kid's in school.
Right. Yeah. I got moved around a bit when I was a kid, and it wasn't terrible, but I think it would be cool to give my kids that continuity if I can.
Yeah, I had same. There was until we moved out here. We moved out here when I was 10, so it's been over 25 years now. Mm-hmm. But when I was prior to that, in that 10-year time span, I think I lived in some instances a new place every year, mm-hmm. and then there was one year in particular where we moved twice during that year. It's very makes you very kind of jittery.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unable to settle down. So yeah,
right.
Stability has been something that that's been important ever since.
Yeah.
So that's cool that my cat's decided she's gonna just bite me for attention. That's great. So full disclosure, I haven't finished the book yet.
Oh, that's
I'm very
fine.
close to being finished with it. I'm really enjoying it, but so those kids make it, right? R.E.M, they do all right.
They do okay. Yeah. The band, they stick together for a while. So.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't want to give
Don't
it
want to
away.
spoil it. Yeah, I don't want to spoil
alert.
anything.
Right,
Damn.
Right.
No, but it seemed like they had a bright future. So, but I am really enjoying it, and I want to get to that eventually. But to begin with, if we can go back, it's kind of talking about the book. But you mentioned there at the beginning that you kind of came in just after that initial scene of music that was happening around the time that they were forming, and what were you a fan of the band prior to moving there?
Yeah, I definitely was. I was thinking about the chronology here and like when I first heard them and relative to other stuff that I got into, and I think I figured out that R.E.M. were probably the first contemporary band that I got really heavily into. So when I fell in love with rock music, it was through initially the Beatles, because my dad was a Beatles fan, and I had a music teacher at my middle school that showed us this documentary called The Complete Beatles, which just blew my mind. And so it was all of these kind of legacy acts that I was working through. So I was listening to the Beatles and Pink Floyd and just getting into all the music of the 60s. Mm-hmm. And then I heard R.E.M. on the radio. And actually, it's embarrassing to say. I mean, I came into this kind of late. So I was like 13 or 14 when Document came out. And so it was Document where I got on board. And then...
That was 89, right?
And it was 87.
87, okay.
Yeah. So
that was the last IRS one?
It was. So at least I can say I heard them.
Before they jumped to the major.
Right. But the one I love, which was... I don't know if they consider that one of their greatest songs. There's not much to the lyrics, but that monster riff just kind of roaring out of the speakers.
Yeah.
I said somewhere else that I had already heard the Byrds, and that riff sounded like a really roughed up Byrds. Mm-hmm. And I heard it on Casey Kasem's American Top 40, and I don't recall what was played prior or what was played after that song, but I do know that song sounded completely different from whatever processed thing was surrounding it. And so I thought, wow, I need to check this out. Bought the cassette, and it was really weird. I mean, his singing on that album, the songs are